Hey everyone, Shane here with etrailer.com. Today I have a 2019 GMC Sierra 2500, and we're going to be adding the Buyers Products 7-pole plug to the front of the vehicle. This is where I chose to install the 7-pole plug. Adding a 7-pole plug on the front is going to give you a lot of different options. Maybe you want to put a carrier up here and you need the functions for, maybe you have some lights or extra lights on the carrier or something like that. Winch plug, anything like that. We're actually installing this for the neighbor. They're actually going to put a mobility carrier up here for a scooter, and they want to be able to move the carrier up and down without having to start the vehicle. Right now it's mounted on the back. So they want it moved up front because they're going to be probably towing a trailer, and they're going to need their hitch space in the back. Adding a 7-pole like this, again, it's going to give you all the different options if you wanted to put lighting on it or something like that. It's also going to have a 4-pole plug that comes attached to it on the back side. It's going to come with a bracket where you can mount the 4-pole to the side of it. Obviously, we're not going to use that. We're only using the power and ground from the 7-pole because the mobility carrier has a 7-pole end on it. So these plugs can be, very versatile. It's going to have a spring-loaded cap on it, so when it's not being used, the cap stays closed. The underside is going to have a rubber seal. It's going to seal right around this edge. It's going to help keep any moisture from getting inside on the connections. As far as the installation process, if you're going to be mounting on the front of the vehicle, it's really going to be up to you on how you mount it. I chose to mount it here where the license plate goes because we added the hitch for that mobility carrier. And the reason I chose to put it here is because this whole piece comes out. If they decided later on they wanted to sell the truck and they wanted to take the hitch off, wanted to take the 7-pole off, maybe move it to a different vehicle, they can replace just this piece. It doesn't affect the bumper itself. To start our installation, this install is going to be a little bit different because we are actually going to be taking the mobility scooter that's in the back and putting it on the front on the hitch. However, our neighbor wants to be able to control it without having the vehicle running. So we're adding a 7-pole because the mobility scooter has a 7-pole plug on it. We're just going to be running power and ground directly to the battery, but we need to determine where we're going to mount this. Being on the front of the vehicle, the 7-pole is not, there's not a usual location like there is on the back of a vehicle. On the back of a truck. We can't get to the cross tube because it's hidden back behind the fascia here to put a bracket on. So I think what I'm going to do is right here in this spot, I'm going to take a hole saw bit, I'm going to cut this out, I'm going to countersink this so that this will sit flat right here. Since he's not going to be able to put his license plate back on, we're going to mount that in there just like that. So we need to make sure before we drill our hole, if this is the way you're going to do it, that the lid is going to open because this overhangs a little. So we're going to make sure we're down far enough. We also want to make sure we're over far enough that this will fit. So how I determine how to do it is we take it, because one side's wider than the other on this particular one, flip it upside down like this, and this little handle, push it up, and then all the way over. You can get a good idea. Right in here, we should be low enough and over far enough that are a little open, and then we can mount this in there. So I'm going to take a 2-inch hole saw bit, and we're going to drill that hole out. Take our plug, feed our wiring in to the back side here. And then we can run some nuts and bolts in there because we can get to the back side, or we can use some self-tappers. But essentially that's what it's going to look like. So what I did is I just added my own self-tappers. You can see we got plenty of room. Lid's gonna open up all the way. It's sturdy, so now we can move on to the wiring part. So I'm only gonna be using the power and ground. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take some electrical tape, I'm gonna tape all the rest of this together. For my ground wire, I think I'm just going to go right to the edge of the frame rail right here, and then we'll extend the power wire up into the engine compartment and go directly to the battery. So I'll take a self-tapper, drill the hole first. So my power wire, butt connector that's on it, I'm actually going to cut off and put a heat shrink butt connector on it. I recommend using heat shrink because it's outside. That heat shrink will seal to the coating around the wire into where the connection is made. It'll help keep that connection from corroding. So we'll cut this off. Strip back the end of that wire. You're going to need to pick up some extra wire to run up to the battery. We'll add on a heat shrink butt connector. Once we get that done, we'll go up top and find a route that we can run our wire up there. So to make it a little bit easier to run my wire up, I'm going to remove this plastic panel that runs across the front over the radiator. It just has push pin fasteners. The way to get these off is on one side, there's a little opening. You can take a flathead screwdriver or a trim panel tool, pry up that center, and then you're going to pop out the whole thing. So you'll have several of them that run around here. Pull those up until you can get this plastic piece off. And we'll just set this aside. So what I did is if you look down, straight down through here, there's an opening. Where our plug goes in, we can feed our black wire, power wire up in between our grill and our radiator. And all I did was route it over right behind the headlight, and it comes out right over here. Because we decided to come over the passenger side to the accessory battery, this is a diesel engine. Can't get this lid off without taking this brace off. So 1/2 inch socket, take the nut off there. There's a little plastic trim piece here that just pops off. Take the bolt off on this side. Take this off, set it aside, and we should be able to pop this up and off. So we're also going to need a fuse holder and a fuse. It's not going to come with the 7-pole. Because it's a mobility carrier, I got a fuse holder that will handle up to 30 amps. I'm going to put a 30 amp fuse in here once I get it connected to the battery. What I'm going to do is I'm going to connect it right here to this post. This nut is not going to come all the way off, so I'll show you how to get the ring terminal on there without having to take it all the way off. We're going to take our fuse holder, cut it in half, strip back both ends, one end. Add on a heat shrink butt connector. Add on a ring terminal. We'll cut our power wire. Add on the other end of the heat shrink butt connector. We'll take our heat source, shrink it up. Just cover the butt connector with some electrical tape. And we're going to take our butt connector. Remember, we can't take the whole nut off. We're just going to cut out a little section here. Be able to slide it around the post. Make sure the fuse is not in the holder. 10mm socket. We'll loosen this nut. Take this and we'll slide it underneath there. Add in our fuse. Now we'll test out the power in the front to make sure we're getting the power that we need. You can see we got power, direct power without the vehicle running, down to our 7-pole plug. So now we have our scooter carrier mounted here in the front, plug into our 7-pole, we'll test it out, make sure it's working it the way they want. As I mentioned, they want it to work without the vehicle running. So we wired it directly to the battery. Seems like it's working correctly. Once you know it's working correctly, you're ready to go. It's going to do it for a look at and installation of the Buyers Products 7-pole plug on a 2019 GMC Sierra 2500.